Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Thanks so much for tuning in and spending a few moments of your day with me. Today I've got a requested mentalism review for you. You may remember from about 3 years ago, I did a review on Timon Krause's book, Witch Hand Method and Philosophy. And in that review, I actually did like the top 5 worst witch hand effects. Those were like witch hand effects you should avoid. So today I'm going over my top 5 picks for those ungaffed witch hand effects for the single Spectator. And this was requested by Jonah Berg here on my channel. I've also decided I'm going to do another top 5 witch hand review later in the week or next week, which is going to be focused on multiple Spectators. And the main reason is because if you perform any witch hand type effect, especially if you start performing for just one person, other people will want to get involved. And so it is important that hopefully you perform more than one version. Maybe you have a version for one-on-one, and then you have a version for multiple spectators, because this is the type of effect that you can get a lot of people involved. Now, as mentalists or magicians, we are always tickled to be able to tell the spectator where the coin is, where the object is. But I would argue that the reason why these types of effects are so strong is because they can just help add to your character as a mentalist, because instead of it being more of a display of figuring out where the object is, it's more of how you're getting a read on the person. So more like you're displaying your ability, your ability of mentalism to be able to know something that you shouldn't be able to know, your ability to read them, to read their persona and their character. And that's really what they're going to be interested in. Otherwise, it reduces this to just a simple bar bet or even like a 50-50. So as usual, I have no disclosures. No one has sent me any of the material that I'm going to be reviewing today. I'm going to be giving you guys my picks for those top 5 effects. I'm going to be going over my criteria. I'm even going to give you a notable mention as well. Some of these items I've already reviewed here on my channel in the past, and I'm going to point that out as we get to them. I'm going to just try to highlight each one and give you guys a good idea of what it is. Hopefully that may pique your interest for you to seek out one or more of these items that you may want to add to your set. The idea of a witch hand routine is something that is almost virtually propless, because you'll be able to do it with just whatever you have on you, which is great, which is why this is such a valuable tool to utilize, or even a borrowed coin as well, or a borrowed object. So that's what makes it such a versatile type of routine, that if you're into mentalism, you really should have a couple of these types of routines under your domination. So at any time you can entertain or go into something or just have some fun and whatnot. Now, if you do enjoy this material, I would urge you to comment, subscribe, give me a thumbs up, because that's how I know that you like the material. Just like my recent video that I put out of why I told you guys that I wasn't buying Enigma. I could tell that a lot of people like that. A lot of people like that kind of video format. And so I will probably be putting out a lot more videos like that in the near future. Why? Because obviously it was very helpful to people. And so if you don't give me some kind of feedback for me to understand if you really enjoy this type of material, then you may not be getting a lot more of this in the future. So I just tell it to you up front. So I could go into the origins of the witch hand effect. I mean, it's very extensive, starting with like Gerald Kosky back in the 70s, and Apocalypse magazine with his effect, which was like to tell the truth, which used 2 spectators at that time. And I mean, Banachek had his versions, but we're going to basically just start out now with the criteria that I set forth for this witch hand type effect review. And I'm going to tell you guys kind of like why that is, because I've experimented with all kinds of these types of effects, even ones that use electronics and gimmicks and stuff like that. And so we're going to get into that shortly. So let's start out with just first the criteria. So the criteria I set forth for this top 5 review is very simple. 1, no gimmicks or gaffes. So there's no electronics and no gimmicks or gaffes. If you are curious about like those, there's many that exist out there. In fact, last year I think it was the September issue of the Hermit magazine, Michael Bowden published a version, which it was called something like "Which Hand Is It In" or something like that. And it was a gimmicked version. And I'm going to tell you guys that I tried it out and it failed. And it was funny because when it failed, I had to revert back to one of these versions that I'm going to be covering here in this review today. So personally, I much rather prefer performing a version that doesn't rely on electronics or gimmicks, things like the Sixth Sense or any of those pro mystic devices, because they may fail on you. Just like the version that I tried from the Hermit magazine from last year, it broke. Luckily, the Spectator didn't notice the gimmick, but it did break. But I mean, it's not like it was lost because I just reverted back to, one of these routines that I know of and that I use all the time. So it was funny though that it totally failed. So that was the first criteria for this top 5 list, is no gimmicks or gaffes. Second criteria is that the effect is virtually impromptu, meaning that you're going to use either a coin maybe you've got on you or a borrowed coin or borrowed coins. And then the third thing is that obviously we're just using one spectator for these effects I'm going over today. Because next week or later in the week, the next top 5 witch hand review is going to focus on multiple spectators. And that's really when we go down the rabbit hole, because it really gets a lot of fun when you get a lot of people involved. And so we'll get to that later on. That is the criteria. Now keep in mind that the material I'm presenting to you guys reflects what I have. So maybe I've missed something, and hey, that happens, right? So if you think that something belongs on this list that I'm not mentioning, then just leave us a comment below. Just make sure that it fits the criteria. So starting out with the notable mention, the first effect I'm going to tell you guys about is the effect by Ran Pink called Right, which I did do a full review on my Workers Review series. The effect is one that's more like of an influence type effect, and it's not really, doesn't really fit the criteria that I set forth here, because it's really not impromptu. You have to have the dollar bill with the number written on it, because the effect is very simple. You ask them if they believe in free will or fate, and then you tell them, do you believe that your decisions are influenced or that you actually have free will? You show them a bill that you have where you have some numbers on it. You have them read those numbers. Then you fold up the bill and you give it to them and you have them hide it in their hand. They switch it back and forth a bunch of times. Eventually, you're able to tell them which hand it's in, and then you can prove to them that you influence them, because when they turn the bill upside down, the numbers actually is a word, and it says right, which is why this is called Right. And I thought the best part of the effect was his clever line of that your brain sees things upside down. I just absolutely love that. It's funny because I like the effect so much that I actually tracked down the origin of the force that he uses. So the force that Ran Pink uses is not his force. He didn't come up with it at all, which is kind of funny. Actually, the person who came up with it, from what I can find, was Jim Steinmeier. That's who came up with it. In his book, Further Impossibilities, he had a routine there that it was called, I think it was called Automatic Palmistry is what it was called in that book. And there he uses the exact same force. Now, of course, Ran Pink has really dressed it up in the version that I go, in the effect Right, which you can check out my full review of that effect here on my channel, and you can learn that on Conscious Magic Volume 4 that he put out with, I can't remember now who else he put it out with. Oh God, I can't remember his name. But anyway, the point is that's where you can find it. So that's our notable mention, and of course it just doesn't meet the criteria for the top 5 here, which is why it's really a notable mention. Now moving along to our list of top 5 ungaffed witch hand effects for the single spectator. This is in order of least to most favorite. So number 5 would be my least favorite. Number 1 is my most favorite, although I like them all. Starting out with number 5, we have the effect that you probably are expecting to be on this list, which is Mark Elsden's Tequila Hustler. Probably the most popular witch hand effect in the magic community, magic industry. It's probably made more money than any other witch hand effect. So the effect basically is a dressed up version of the lie truth teller plot. And it is interesting because Mark Elsden actually published in his book Conversation as Mentalism, back in like 2012, he published a version that was called Lies. Now that version, Lies, was actually like an exact same, it was like an exact same variation of the original Koski version from the 70s in Apocalypse. The difference is that he's using his hands. One is a liar and the other is a truth teller, and they would draw an X on one of the hands, and you just ask one question. And it's the exact same question from the routine that you can find in Apocalypse, which is really kind of funny in a way. So that way you could tell them where the X was. And in Mark Elsden's book, Conversation as Mentalism, it really is just presented as a bar bet, like as a very simple thing. So here he's really cleaned it up, because here he got rid of the idea of having to have both roles being playing. So your spectator is just going to be playing either a truth teller or a liar, and you're going to be asking them two simple questions. It is interesting because if you look at the method, you will see that the method shares the same exact method as the classic puzzle of two doors with two guards in front of it, where there's like a lion behind one and there's a treasure behind the other, and you have to ask one of them one question. It's like the exact same method, but he broke it up into two pieces because the person's only playing one role, which is really interesting. Anyway, I find it fascinating because I'm very analytical. You probably are just like, I'm not interested in that. I want to know how the effect is done. I want to know what I need to know. So the effect is completely self-working. You can use any object you want. The issues you may have with it is that it's only a one-phase effect. So essentially you have the spectator hide an object behind their back in one of their hands, and you tell them that you want them to either play the role of a liar or a truth teller. You have them bring their hands out in front of them, and you're going to ask them a question, and then they're going to put their hands behind their back again and give them the option to switch the object to their other hand if they want to. And then with just that, you can ask them, you just ask them whether or not they actually switched it, and then you're able to tell them immediately where the object is. Now in the original version by Mark Elsden, that I think he put it out like in 2015, around there, in the original version, the second phase of it was, after you revealed where it was you would have them read the date, and you would have them tell you 5 dates. One of the dates would be the accurate date, and you would be able to tell them which one it was, which was kind of weak, and it didn't really make a lot of sense. I felt that Mark Elsden was just trying to stretch it to try to get it to, to be more of a real routine. And I think that if you're really interested in Tequila Hustler, you should probably just get the deluxe version, where you're going to learn more robust routines of it that are presented by like Michael Murray, as well as I think there's a version of like by Peter Turner in there as well, just because you're going to learn a version that's just a little bit more robust. And a good friend of mine actually told me that there's also a variation that was published in the Journal of Science by Michael Weber. So there's also a version there. I don't have that, so I have no idea what that is, but I was told that that does exist. So again, you may want to hunt it down. In my own experience, I've used Tequila Hustler as a phase of a witch hand, combining it with other witch hand type effects, because alone it's just a one-phase effect, and alone it just feels like a 50-50. Although I will tell you guys that the strongest part of it is you seemingly are telling the spectator if they're telling the truth or lying. And I think that's what makes it really strong, because of the statement that Mark Elsden teaches you there, which makes the whole thing feel like more of a character read than just finding the coin or the object. In any event, this is number 5 on my list of top 5 witch hand effects that are ungaffed for one spectator. Moving along to number 4, we have an effect, well, it's actually a whole book. I'll recommend to you the whole book, which is called Phological by Red Devil. The whole book is amazing. And if you do follow the work of Red Devil, then you may have even seen his earlier work of Operation Gemini. And this kind of builds off of that. But this is a totally different method of witch hand. You're going to be learning a couple of forces, a couple of switches. The gist of this routines that are in the book are the basic, where your spectator is going to be taking a couple of coins and they're going to be hiding them in their hands. They're going to switch some coins around. They can think of one coin and you're able to tell them where the coin is that they're thinking of, seemingly without really knowing anything else. There's some versions where you'll be able to tell them where all the coins are. And my favorite routine from the book is called Foquivoke is what it's called, Foquivoke. And in that version, you give the spectator 4 coins, or you can ask them for 4 coins, and you tell them to hide 2 in each hand. And this is with your back turned, or they turn around, they hide 2 in each hand. And then you give them all the choices after that. You can let them, switch a couple of coins if they want, they're allowed to switch some coins. And then you tell them to name any 2 coins. Now, the interesting thing about the routine is that about 33% of the time, the 2 coins that they name, you'll be able to tell them exactly where they are. And that seems absolutely impossible. And it's because of the forces that you're going to learn in the book. It's very, very clever. The method, again, it's totally different from any of these other methods that you're going to see or hear about. So it just uses completely different ideas. And I thought that routine is very clever because it actually has different endings based on what the spectator decides. And that's probably why he called it Foquivoke. But the best part about it, I would say, is that I really like the presentation of it. I really like the pattern of the routine. It really made sense. And it really felt like a full routine, not just that you're looking for a coin, And I do like the idea how you're using 4 coins, because it just makes it seem really complex, impossible in the mind of the spectator, because they get all the choices. They could put the coins anywhere they want. You seemingly don't have any idea where anything is. Then they're allowed to make more decisions themselves. They get to decide which coins they want to switch, and it's just great in that way. Very, very clever, the whole book. So I would recommend the whole book to you. If you liked how this sounds, I would say pick it up. It's definitely worth it. You're really going to like it a lot. And this is number 4 on my list of top 5 ungaffed witch hand effects for the single spectator. Moving along to number 3, we have another routine, another effect that I've reviewed here on my channel, which is called Swap by David D. And this is a classic witch hand type effect where you have a spectator hide an object in their hand, and you're going to have them either think about positive or negative energy. And the first phase, you're able to tell them, which hand is like their empty hand. And then the second phase, you actually tell them exactly where the coin is, and so, or the object, The method is totally different from the other effects that I've mentioned here, and it's super simple to perform. You really just have to learn the script. Once you learn the script, then you can perform it. And since it's like a multiple phase effect, it really plays really strongly. It makes the spectator feel like you really could get a read on them. So that's number 3 on my list. Moving along to number 2, we have the effect that I had reviewed before here on my channel 3 years ago, which is You've Got No Choice, and you might have seen it on Penn and Teller's Fool Us, where Timon Kraus performed it. You can learn that in his book, which was called Witch Hand, Method and Philosophy. Now, I went over this in detail 3 years ago. The book is out of print, and so if you're interested in this, you're going to have to hunt it down and buy it secondhand. The book, it's filled with a totally different method for being able to tell, and I really liked the script of the routine, because the script makes it feel like it's very psychological, that you're able to read the spectator based on psychology more than anything else. And so the tells that you're going to learn are totally different from other tells that you're going to learn from other types of routines like this. And so I really think that anyone who's into the witch hand type plot should definitely try to hunt down this book and learn the material from it. I took extensive notes of the book. I read the book almost 5 times when I had it, before I sold my own copy of it, because I found it that valuable. There's actually some other routines in the book as well, but the one routine that I thought was the best routine was the You've Got No Choice. That routine is just so strong, and I think that you'd like it a lot. The last phase, which is more of a prediction phase, is kind of optional. I mean, you could do it if you want to. I never really liked his idea of the actual way that he does it. You know, he used like a something from who was it? Mark Oberon's prop to do that. The way I performed it, I don't use that at all. I don't bother with that. I just reveal it, because I just think that's overkill of trying to prove that you know, predicted ahead of time everything that they would do. Although some people would like that. Again, with this method, you don't need to use anything. It can be completely impromptu, and it's multiple phases, which is exactly what you want, because, you know, multiple phases means you really can prove that you got a read on your spectator, that you really can, you know, figure them out. And I really love, like I mentioned to you guys, the patter. The patter is just pure gold. My number one pick for the best ungaffed witch hand effect for the single spectator goes to the Witch Hand Project by Aidan O'Sullivan. Now, when I picked this up a couple of years ago, it was actually just the Witch Hand lecture, and now it's become a project because they've added more to it. But this is a 4-phase witch hand effect routine, where by the end of it, your spectator is going to believe that you can read their whole persona, that you know them. And the script is very clever, extremely well thought out. I think that it just is very entertaining to the spectator, and you're going to find that they're going to be laughing as you go through this, because it seems like you just know what they're going to do before they even do it, which is great. The method is very clever, and they'll never realize what you're doing, which is great. Even you will be fooled. When you watch this, you'll be fooled yourself in the beginning, which is what really makes this so strong. You'll see how strong that it really is. Again, it's totally different from any of these other effects, but what I really like is that it does use also those little ploys where you're going to be telling the person, like, you know, most people put it in this hand, you know, and so you're going to be able to really fry them with that. Now, it's not 100% effective, you know, like once in a while you'll miss, because it's not 100%. I'd say it's probably like closer to 90%, but the vast majority of times that I've used the routine, it's worked perfectly without a hitch, and it's just like absolutely blown people away. And for me personally, this is the routine I'm going to go to if I'm going to be performing a witch hand effect for a single spectator. It just feels complete. The script is just really clever. It's very well thought out. It's just impressive, and it's easy to remember too. For me, I found that it was extremely easy to remember. I learned the routine maybe 20 minutes, and after that you're ready to go and perform, which is just great. You have a lot of fun with it, something you can use at the drop of a hat. So anyway, this is my list of top 5 ungaffed witch hand effects for the single spectator. Hopefully this has been helpful to you guys. As usual, if you have any questions or comments, just leave them for me below. Thanks so much for tuning into my reviews, and I'll see you on the next one.